things. I started out with an entry-level producing job at CBS News Path in New York. That's their broadcast wire service. And shortly after, I got a reporting job at MTVU, which is MTV's college network. After that, I did a few other reporting jobs. I worked for ABC's broadband channel. I worked in local news. And at all of those positions, I never really felt like I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing, which was international work. So ultimately, I decided if I was going to do it, I was going to have to do it on my own because I didn't see opportunities to do international work with someone at my level. Generally speaking, you're at a much higher level before somebody will pay for you to travel and cover the news for them. So I quit my job and I bought some equipment, shooting and editing equipment, and I set off on an adventure of freelancing to see if I could make it work. And much to my surprise, it did work. I was able to sell my work to people and pay for trips abroad, and that's how I started doing freelance international work. And after doing that for a while, I met the people at NBC, and they invited me in for some interviews, and it eventually offered me a job doing exactly what I was doing as a freelancer, but just here at NBC. Yeah, I've always found it strange when young people, when their goal is to be an anchor, because that doesn't tell me you have an interest in journalism, that tells me you have an interest in being on television. The reality is that being an anchor can be, and this is not true for everyone, but for me, it was my reality. I found it to be a little boring. I was inside all day. I was never going out gathering any information. I was looking at these feeds coming in and seeing what was happening in the world, but I wasn't actually out there covering it. So my desire was to be in the field, therefore being in the studio felt like I was missing something. In terms of how news had been covered when I first came out of school, it was the traditional model was pretty much the only model. So you have very specialized roles in the newsroom. You have a producer that produces, you have an editor that edits, you have a camera person that shoots, you have reporters that report, whereas now we're seeing a lot more blurring of those lines in terms of. Well, I think what we're seeing now is the spectrum has widened. So whereas before you had a very narrow spectrum of these people do these jobs in very specialized roles. Now you still have people that do work that way, but you also have people like me who occasionally I work completely alone, beginning to end, and pitching a story until it gets on air. And then you have everything in between. So you have producers who shoot, you have shooters who produce, you have reporters who edit, you have all this mix and matching of duties, and that's pretty much what we're seeing now. And what that means is, again, there's a spectrum of. If it's a feature story with a long deadline, I can, take my time in producing it and travel and shoot it and come back and script it and cut it. So everything from beginning to end. When I was in Haiti, it was a much quicker turnaround and, much faster pace. I was working with many, many other people. I was working in the way that most correspondents or traditionally correspondents work. So I had a camera person, I had a producer. There was a producer here in the States that was cutting the piece with an editor. So that was a much bigger team, a bigger group effort. And then there's everything in between. Sometimes I'll work with just one other person and we'll produce and edit together. So it runs the gamut of being alone to being in a really traditional environment. See, I don't feel that a niche is defined by kind of your content or expertise. It can be. So you can be an expert on technology or an expert on the environment, and that can be helpful. I think what's most important, and probably what your instructors are trying to convey to all of you, is to have something that sets you apart. Because the pack is very talented and very qualified and very eager, and you have to set yourself apart from all of those qualified, talented, eager people. So whatever it is that you can do that brings a little something extra to the table is going to suit you in the end. So in my case, it was just that I had a variety of skills that I could do at a certain level. I'm not saying I was fantastic at everything, but I think I had there was a certain standard of quality that I maintained throughout. So whatever it is that you can do to set yourself apart from the pack, I think will ultimately help. So if you can really become a great editor, a great shooter, those are the things that I think are going to help.